If it's conservative.
If you're looking for something liberal
and realistic, this is the place to be.
Hello and welcome to the podcast with no name. This is a youth podcast, but is for everyone. The last time we recorded, it was before camp meeting, and I'm sure we all had a great time. Today with me on the podcast, we have Pastor Nehemiah Piri. On my left, on my immediate right, we have Paida, and on my far right, we have Pastor Gate. Welcome, guys. Welcome, pastors. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we last met each other before camp meeting. What were your sentiments from camp meeting?
I think the camp meeting was okay. It was just on point.
Okay.
Yes.
Paida?
It came by, I did spend more time with the kids, and we managed to learn a lot of stuff, especially concerning drugs.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, I think camp was cool.
It was cool.
Yeah, that was cool.
It's cool as a cucumber.
Yeah, sure. That's the point. Yeah.
All right. Yes, camp was indeed a blessing, and we're back again with our podcast. We've discussed various topics ranging from marriage, from lobola. We have even discussed drugs, abuse. But in this segment, we want to then touch on church heritage. We've realized that a lot of not just the youth, but even the adults don't even understand their identity. So the end goal is to give the usual Adventists an identity, to know where you came from and why you believe in what you believe in. A lot of us were born and raised even on the pulpit, but you don't know what it means to be Adventist. We also hope to unpack the fact that the gospel that we believe in is a combination of other things that came not only from the Adventist church, but we have a lot of borrowed concepts which then amalgamated into one thing. So, speaking of which, we would like to start off with church heritage to understand where we came from, and starting with the Old Testament church. So I believe this is why we are here today, and let's dive in right into it.
Sure.
So I believe we've got the church in Genesis, which is the Eden church. Maybe I'll ask one of you to give us an introduction on the church in Eden.
Okay. Let me take the church in Eden. We cannot talk about church heritage without referring to the book of Genesis, where all beginnings begin. So the church also began somewhere in the beginning. Yeah, I'll read just verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then it goes on and gives us whatever was created. But chapter 2, verse 1, then God introduces the Sabbath. That's in the Garden of Eden. So this is a church. Now you're going to be asking me who was part of this church. It was Adam and Eve and God. So there were 3 members of this church. 2 who were like us, and God being the leader of this church. This is the church in Eden. They survived on 2 principles. The first one, thou shalt not eat of this tree. You know, the tree thing. Yes. The second one is to rest on the Sabbath. So they lived with those 2 principles, and whatever happened in this church or in this family setup, by the way, it was a church in a family setup. So we could not talk about church without involving the family. So in the family, they considered not eating the fruit. When they go to church, their commandment was simple. Just as God rested, finished, and blessed. That's what was meant in the Eden church. I think basically that's what I can say. Yeah.
All right. And we hear that God visited the church every day. And then we then had some mischief happening where someone was dismembered. Would you mind expanding on that, Pastor?
All right, I would say even in the church where everything was fine, there was a thou shalt not. Everything was holy and everything was on point, but God has said, you shall not. So the thou shalt not of the Lord even today is not because they sin, but because it is instigating obedience from us.
Okay.
Because God said, thou shalt not. Then Unfortunately, they did. And punishment came, or a sentence came. So even today, when we see the church that we have today disciplining me, they're not the authors of discipline. It was God himself who said, because we've done this, we've broken the thou shalt not, then a discipline is going to come. And unfortunately for our first parents, they had to get out of the garden, so because of their mischief. So there are times even in the church today when I'm asked to sit down, Pastor Gift, please sit down and consider the mischief that you have done. It's not that the people are, they hate me, but because I have to reflect on what I've done on eating the forbidden fruit or on breaking one of the thou shalt not. So that's what I think in the church in Genesis.
Okay. Yes, brother.
I wanted to add to the fact that this church looked as if they had two commandments. The first being that remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Yes. That was one. And then the other one, there was the institution of marriage, where there's a definition of the marriage being between a husband and a wife, male or female. So in the church, in the Garden of Eden, it has that institution. Even when they were dismembered, they were supposed to keep those two things. And then from their being dismembered, they then had children. And in the aspect of them having children, there was also, it seems as if there is another law which was introduced, or it was there, but it seems it was introduced, the law of not murdering. So in that church already, we are saying there is the institution of marriage between a man and a woman. Then there is the institution of the Sabbath. 6 days thou shalt do all thy work, and then they rested. And then there is this institution of not murdering. There's also the institution of loving your brother.
Okay.
So maybe to add on to what Paira is saying, God is also instituting work in this church.
Yes.
So you can't be a church member and not working.
Okay. I'm charged on what Paira said. I'm just reflecting on the church that we have today. Many of the times that we wed, we marry, and we exclude the church. On our weddings, we exclude the church. Even when we marry, we exclude the church. But marriage is instituted in a church setup where God is present and everyone is there. So I'm just reflecting on what we are doing today. The church is still important because when we have these weddings as they came, God is present. So let's not remove the church.
I'm also seeing where there was a male and a female.
Oh, thank you.
To constitute a family.
Yes.
Not male and male. Adam. They say Adam and Steve.
Yes.
Madam and Eve.
Okay, Madam and Eve.
It was male and female.
Yes.
So we see that being cemented in the church in Eden.
So basically, I think for the church to move forward, the church now, the founding principles and the knots to live by are all taken from the church in Eden.
Okay.
I also want to add, Ronnie, on the fact that if you look at Cain and Abel, they also show us that there was the doctrine of giving back to God.
Yes.
So they wouldn't come to worship just as they are, with nothing. For them, coming to worship was to bring God something. A gift, which is acceptable. And it's interesting that these two, they were children of Adam and Eve, but they knew which gift to bring.
So thank you for introducing the church outside the garden. And that's now the church outside the garden. And we are seeing two more members are joining, Cain and Abel.
Yes.
And there is an issue of sacrifices and offerings. And could you expand more on the issue of the home being an altar and what offerings mean? Because a lot of people tend to think that offering is just your 10% and then the 10th animal from the herd. What else is involved in the offering space?
Okay, maybe to start with, God requires that these guys come and give him something, the Cain and Abel, and which both of them agreed that God will bring you something. in as much as the other one brought what God had not requested, but he had that in mind that I'm supposed to bring something. So this is a point where giving is not a church principle. Allow me to say that. Okay. It's not a church principle, but it's a home principle. Yes.
Okay.
So when we are saying it's a home principle, we are saying God does not need our things for him to survive and for his church to move on.
That's deep.
But we, you and I, you have your talents that are limited to you, and I have my talents that are limited only to me. So for us to move together, we have to combine those talents, and then we move forward. So when God is requiring the issue of giving, he's saying, fine, we might argue saying, I can't give to Ronnie.
Yeah.
But when it comes to giving to God, I feel like I'm doing it for God.
Okay.
So by him now requiring that we give, he's trying to implant the issue of saying, fine, you can't give your brother, give me.
Okay.
Yes, just give me. And then when you give it to God, then there's a verse that is thrown there that then says,
Oh, I see.
Right.
I'm your relative, I'm poor, you can't give me, you give to God. And then God says, go and give to the poor.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So giving becomes a principle. Yes. Not only does it start where Cain and Abel are giving, it also starts with Eve giving to Adam.
Okay.
Yes. I think let me leave it there.
I think Pastor Gatti, you need to expand a bit more there.
I'll give it to Paida.
I'm personally not going to touch on that. I'm not there yet in that institution. But back to Cain and Abel in the giving aspect.
Yes.
Their focus of them now giving started from Genesis 3 verse 15, where the Bible then says, I'll put enmity between your seed and her seed. So this giving was not just a giving, J.
Okay.
It was supposed to be a specific giving directing to the sacrifice of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
So whatever that they were supposed to offer was supposed to be in line with the seed, which was supposed to be a sacrifice of blood.
Oh,
I want to quote on the word sacrifice. Coming back to our church, if there is no sacrifice in your giving, there is no giving to me. You ought to sacrifice something. So if it's just like what people do when the offering plate is now moving, they collect the change that they took from this shop, and then they look at the money, and then that's not the sacrifice. Yes, you are giving in quotes, but you're not giving to the Lord.
Okay.
There is an element of sacrifice which is supposed to happen.
Sure.
That's why in Cain's aspect, his sacrifice was not received because he brought that which was not supposed to be brought.
Yes.
It's good to give the first fruit, to give to, but then there comes a time when you ought to do the sacrifice.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. And do you see that our God is particular? In the garden, you are saying, this you shall not eat. Even after the garden, he's saying, this you shall not bring.
Okay.
So there are things that God, we need to tell each other, even today, God is particular. We just don't do what we want. You get it. That's my point. Number two, the church outside Eden is an Adventist church.
Okay.
Allow me to say so. Paida gave us a text, Genesis 3:15.
Yes.
They are waiting for the seed. So when they had their first child after they'd sinned, they thought maybe he is the seed. Alas, he was not. When they had their Seth, they thought he was the seed. He was not. So they were now living in anticipation, waiting for the coming of the seed.
Okay.
You see it now? So the roots of Adventism are even in Genesis chapter 3, whereby we are waiting for the coming of the seed.
So that we can be restored back.
We can restore back to that beautiful garden. So right now we are in this church. We are waiting for the coming of Jesus, for the final, crushing of the head of the serpent. In as much as these were waiting for him, we are also waiting for the coming of Jesus.
All right. There's something that is interesting about this church outside the garden.
Yes.
These are relatives.
Okay.
And they coexisted in terms of worship. Okay. I'm trying to think of a church board in those days where the father is there, the mother is there, and the children are there. These days, we somehow, if Gata is my mother's child, I'm sensitive to say you can't throw his name in the church board. Even when he does something evil, I'm meant to protect him.
But it's your blood.
Because it's my blood. But I'm looking at this church when Cain had killed Abel. This is the same church, the church board, that made Cain to run away. Because it understood that the principles that we had in the garden, in as much as we failed, God chased us out of the garden. What happens now if we fail outside the garden?
All right.
Yes.
Yes.
Just wait.
Yes.
I'm actually thinking of this along those lines. Adam and Eve sinned.
Yes.
A plan was put for them for grace. Listen to the fact that I'm saying grace already in the Old Testament, in Genesis. And then when Cain killed his brother, grace was then again offered to him. Because it is said that no one is going to smite you, no one is going to kill you, even though you have killed. So grace was even offered in the Genesis church. Grace was there.
Okay. I think I think this is now getting interesting. If grace is in Genesis, then to me, God giving them the commandments, that was grace.
Exactly.
Yeah, to me. So we cannot talk about grace without God instituting a plan for us to be saved.
The plan of redemption.
Yeah.
So there's this common talk, like when you go out to speak to people, and they're saying, okay, you are saying the church in Eden, outside the garden, he was waiting for the seed.
Yes.
Right? And we are still waiting for the seed.
Yes.
Right? And all this time we have been waiting for the seed.
Yes, yes.
So people get, what hope can we give to someone who's saying, no, we've been waiting for the seed for that long. Okay. We are still waiting for the seed now.
All right.
So I might as well jola right now and
All right. So his coming had to be in phases.
Okay.
When his first advent, he was coming to deal with the problem of sin. He was coming to redeem us from sin.
Okay.
Right. That is from the effect of sin. So he died so that we are liberated from the effects of sin.
Yeah.
But when he comes now, the advent we are waiting for him is to take us away from the presence of sin.
Okay.
You get it?
Okay.
So the first time he came, he was coming to deal with the sin problem. How? So that we are not under the effects of sin, death itself. So he came to die the death that was supposed to die, the first advent. So it's good to wait for him during that time. They were waiting for that advent. But now, as we are waiting for him, we are waiting for him to deliver us from the presence of sin.
Okay.
As we go to a holy state, to a holy place.
Yeah.
So it's not that from Adam till now, it's the same continuous line. They were waiting for him to come. Of course, their minds were crooked. They thought you were going to come and, establish a kingdom and stuff like that. But at least they were waiting for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So now let's now look at the family churches.
Okay.
We've got Abraham, we've got Lot. We also have Noah, right? I believe the concept around those churches is that the home must be the center of worship, right? So let's now look at those three, whichever we may start with Abraham, Lot, and Noah, and let's dissect those.
Okay.
I think we need to start with Noah.
Noah.
I'll put a comment saying when God was done with mankind, he wanted to leave mankind in an environment that's comfortable, both for existence socially and spiritually.
Okay.
So for that to be balanced, men being masculine and female being feminine, they needed to balance up the masculinity and the femininity in them to create a balanced church.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Which this is a church with feelings and with the mind.
Okay.
Yes. So God then decided to say, in a family setup, then we have a church. We have a he, we have a she, and we have the children.
All right.
So that's why you would see that in Genesis, we have more of family churches than congregational churches.
Yeah, because families were saved and not tribes.
Yes, families were saved and not tribes. Yeah. So introducing the family of Noah, even his message, you'd see that it was more appealing to his own family than to the next person's family. Okay. Because when he preached, he understood the needs of his own family.
Okay.
So I would make a mistake, Pastor Gate and Ida, to go in front of people and preach a message that is not relevant to my own family.
Okay. Preach to your people first.
So is this why we urge churches to be small? Fine, we've got families.
Yes.
But also churches, there was a time, or I don't know if it's still now, but it helps in the sense, like you're saying, you talk to people in your congregation.
In a congregation, yes.
Yeah.
You become more appealing. And one thing that is interesting about the family church, the father was the priest of the family.
Okay.
So he was more like a representative of God in the family.
Okay.
I would have, if it was outside, I would have said, if then Ellen White, when she comments, she then says, your home is a little heaven. What constitutes then of heaven, Pastor Gate? It's God and the holy beings, the angels.
Yes.
So if my home, if I'm in a family church, there should be a sense of God, and there should be a sense of angels. Yes.
Okay.
I wanted to say that the Bible even mentions in the New Testament that for one to be an elder or a bishop, he should be able to manage his own household.
Yes.
So the plan of God was before you start being a minister publicly, be a minister in your own house.
Yes.
It's interesting that for a certain time, it says the sons of God, so that the daughters of men were beautiful.
Yes.
That's where the sin started. These sons of God were not being managed well for them to see the daughters of God.
Okay.
They were now seeing the daughters of the world because of, I like to think of the fathers which were in the homes.
Yeah.
So the fathers had a problem.
So the fathers had a problem. To the
priest
extent
had a
that
problem.
God then regretted creating men because he who was supposed to stand up as a priest was not putting himself in the position of the priest.
Yes.
Okay.
They were allowing, if you look at going back to Adam and Eve, the one who stood at a position of being the priest of the house seemed to be Eve. Because she was the one who made the decision for the family.
Oh.
And even up to today, we are suffering the consequences of that. If Adam had stood in his position as the priest of the home, I doubt he would be in this position. So yes, the father of the home, like Noah, was supposed to stand up as a priest. And then if you look at the story of Noah, he made sure that not only himself, but even the daughter-in-law, daughters-in-law, were part of the group that managed to get into the ark because the father stood as a priest.
Then she's on fire.
Yeah, she's burning. I think she wants to take my position. I would say the church in Noah's house was a church that was founded on grace. Why am I going back to these things? I'm also mirroring the church that we have today.
Yes.
We speak of grace all. Some people use, pretty terms, dispensation of grace.
Yeah.
This also was a dispensation of grace because Genesis chapter 6 then says, but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord.
Yes.
So number one, it was a church that is running under the grace of God.
Okay.
And allow me to say, this church also had prophecies. Hey, this is too much now. Also, let me prophesy. It had prophecies. How? Remember, he preached these 120 days.
Yes.
There was a time frame, a time period, a time prophecy. After these 120 days, there's going to be something happening. So this church had a present truth, and the present truth was enter into the ark for you to be saved. And there was a timeline, a prophetic timeline, 120 days. And there was a prophet, Noah himself. So these things we're going to see in all the churches that we're going to have.
Okay.
And even the life of Methuselah, it was another timeline that they were given. When this person dies, something's going to happen. So God never left the church alone or groping in darkness. He put things there. So the 120 days were more like grace period. Otherwise, the life of Methuselah itself, it was prophecy. When this man dies, something's going to happen. So it was a church that was under the dispensation of grace. It was a church that has its own prophecies as well, in as much as we have ours. So if their prophecies were fulfilled in the coming down of the flood, our prophecies are going to be fulfilled in the coming down of fire and brimstone.
Okay, to add on to what Pastor Gate is saying about the issue of grace.
Yes.
In case, assuming you were there in that time, you don't believe what Noah is saying, but then you see animals walking directly to the ark. That should inspire something in you to think along the lines of
repenting, of course.
Repenting, yes, and something should be happening. And it's interesting that when the animals were now in the ark was not closed.
No, but remember, during those days, miracles were very common, right? Because like it's just like in today's age, a lot of people are performing miracles, and you find some of the celebrities convert to Christianity. It's common for us to believe, no, she's after the money.
No.
You know, it's a political game that she's playing. You know, so whilst there are people who are truly converting, our sinful nature does not allow us to believe that even they also deserve Jesus Christ. So even seeing those animals walk in, you tend to think, no, this guy is mad. I mean, 120 years preaching. And God was silent throughout the 120 years. People died, people were born, and
now it's interesting that from your question, it's like we are linking it to the previous question that you asked concerning the fathers. We have heard this, that Christ is going to come, and we have long waited.
Nothing is happening.
Yes, it's the same thing. Like this one was preaching that it's going to rain. It had never rained. And then in that moment of, like, we are human beings, we doubt. It's never going to happen. We tend to believe such things. But then there are certain miracles that you can tell on.
Something big.
There are certain things that we can say, we doubt. It's a gray area probably. But then there are certain things which when they happen, your conscience, which is the Holy Spirit, is going to show you that this is God speaking to you and you ought to do something. Remember, the ark was open for them to get in for days.
Okay. I want us to tackle, we've done Noah, auntie. I want us to also tackle Lot.
Okay.
Let's go on to Lot. And then the final, after we go through these three, we also then go into the drunkenness to show the human element of the church. So let's go to Lot, then we go to Abraham. Yes.
Okay, Lot is also a family church.
Yes.
Lot's house, that's himself, the wife, and the children. But I want us to understand that he's getting his... the beginning of his journey with the Lord starts in Abraham's home. This is an uncle. And he says, whatever the uncle is doing, even when I go to my own home, I need to go and establish this. Maybe I just want to challenge fathers out there. Fathers especially. That would your sons go and start a family church in their homes? When they leave your home, maybe he's gotten married or he has gone to school, he has gone far away from, would you go and say, whatever I learned there, I should institute in my family. So this is Lot now. He's alone after the disputes. You know there were disputes. But after the disputes, he even goes and says, fine, we have had the disputes, but God, I need him in my home. And he had his church where he was the priest, he had the daughters, and he had the wife. He was in control. In as much as this is one of the churches that I think it resonates with our church now. Because he was living in an environment where sin was normal. And he chose that his own family church be a normal in a normal sinful environment. This is the church. So I'm looking at it this way. Many times we want to go for the normal. This is what they are doing there. This is what they are doing that side. So let's just be normal. But I'm looking at this Lord's church. It's a normal, in a normal setup. And they choose to say, we are the remnant of this environment. We are the remnant of Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot was in charge, the wife was there, the children were there. Up until when God decided to destroy, then Abraham could also testify that there is another church somewhere there. But the question then to our audience or to our fellow church members, would I give a testimony of another family holding on to the same God that I'm holding on to?
So, I mean, I'm also seeing how many of our visitors actually visit our homes and see Jesus in our homes, such that when they leave, I mean, most of us get to live with our younger brothers, and when they leave your house after 5 years, after going through university by UZ, do they, and even if they don't become Adventists, but do they at least get something good out of staying with you?
Maybe to answer your question, we have to talk about Abraham, because he gets to a point where he says to Lot, because of the people that are around us, let there be no disputes. So sometimes we have a tendency of shouting at our siblings, shouting at our relatives, forgetting that we have people who are around us, who are watching us, who are looking to see if we really believe that which we preach. So Abraham then says to Lot, let there be no disputes between us for the sake of those who are around us. So I want you to choose which side you'd go. If you say you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you say you go to... then
call us now. Preach, my sister. Call us now.
So it's interesting to note that he learned. For me, he was learning something from that. Not only that, there was a time when Abraham would receive visitors. Lot would see what happens when his uncles receive visitors. We as this new church in this era, what do we do when we receive visitors? After they have left, don't we discuss them?
So forgive me for this wild example. Let's say a couple is fighting in their home. So sometimes it means they have to contain their fight to avoid for
the sake of strangers.
For the sake of strangers. Yes. I think a lot of us we tend we are only Christian when things are okay. But when things go bad, we forget what we believe in.
We go bad with them.
Actually, Ronnie, in this social media era, you'll be so shocked that it's a brother who is fighting against a brother. Yes. In as much as we might have our differences in ideologies and in thinking, Abraham is saying to Lot, you are my brother.
We cannot fight.
We cannot fight. Yes. It's better you go and exist somewhere and I exist here and we don't fight. When people see us, remember at some point Lot had a challenge and Abraham had to actually send his army to protect this same person. Whom he had disagreed with.
Please don't mention about the army. Paida is here.
Okay, I'm not going to talk about the army, but anyway, notice this. Abraham was the father to Lot, but he's asking Lot, the child, to choose. How many fathers in this new generation of churches are willing to let the child choose? Or we say, since I'm the father, didn't worry about Baba Napa, I'm supposed to do this. So sometimes you have to be the bigger person. And at least exhibit not only to the people around you, but even to this young man, to this relative, to show that I'm the Christian here. You choose. To them, you're giving them an upper hand. But notice what happens when these children are given the chance to choose. They choose towards Sodom.
Let me comment on that now. We are commenting on the church in Lot's house. You know, Pastor, you mentioned that Abraham, when he was interceding before God, you were saying there's a church in Sodom. So there has to be a church in Sodom. But here's the problem. The church in Lot's house was supposed to be distinct. And at start, like what Paida said, it was distinct. It was different. I'm in Genesis chapter 13, verse 12. Look at the distinction. And Abraham dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tents. Paida talked about pitching the tents towards Sodom. I just want us to note that when he started, he was living in a tent. Are we there? Let's go to Genesis chapter 19. Genesis chapter 19. Now the strangers we talked about, he's now, hospitable and stuff like that. He said, behold, now my lords, turn in, and I pray you, into your servant's house. So he was now like the Sodomites. initially was different. He was peculiar. This man lives in a tent. He's different from us. The way he eats, the way he dresses, he sings every night. He's different from us, but he allowed his garments to be tainted. At the end of the day, he had a standard number in Sodom. He had a house. Yeah. So we're going to have a big problem. The reason why there were no 50 people in Sodom is because this church had now just become just like them. He was no longer living in tents. I mean, Hebrews, Abraham lived the rest of his life in tents, together with even Jacob. But Lot thought to have a house
in Sodom.
So I'm saying, don't build houses. I'm saying.
Okay, I'm itching.
Yes.
When you mentioned the tent issue,
yes,
these people knew that they have no home.
Exactly.
They were nomads. They were moving towards.
Yes.
Okay, you can continue.
So building now a house, you are saying, I've made it. I'm going nowhere. Are we not also doing the same in some instances, in some situations, whereby instead of having tents, we are now having houses as a church? The reason why there's no evangelism, the reason why I'm saying, why don't we have people coming out of our houses and being lights tomorrow where they are going? It's because we're just like the world. Let us live in our tents. In dressing, let's live in our tents. In music, let's live in our tents. In eating, let's live in our tents. Wherever we are as a church, let's live in our tents.
Even in relationships.
In relationship, let's live in our tents.
I'm not going to comment on relationships.
I don't want to comment there as well.
What I want to focus on is Abraham interceded on behalf of the church.
Yes.
And then he said, at least if there is 10 people,
Yes.
the church in Gomorrah was there. So I'm asking myself this question.
Sure.
If I'm to intercede in the wood that I stay in,
Would there be?
would they be 10 people whom I have ministered to?
27,000 people.
I know in the groups that I'm in on WhatsApp, the discussion that we have I tried to reach out to them? Lot was there. Yes, in Sodom and Gomorrah. Yes, they knew that in this house, there is this man and the wife and the children, to the extent that when he asked the other children to come because of this angel, they thought he was just bluffing. So in our spheres of influence, at work, at home, on the WhatsApp groups that we are in, do they know that this one is waiting for the second coming?
On Instagram and Facebook.
I'm actually thinking about what you're saying, Paida. How many times has Ronnie prayed for a sister company? Yeah, you're in business. Have you ever prayed for a sister company? Not only that, I'm actually thinking to myself, yes, the church in Madokero at some point said, today we are praying for Harare City Center Church. Because there is Abraham praying for another church.
Yes.
Let's move.
Before we move, we have a tendency of looking at the negatives. Abraham knew his nephew and he understood the negatives that he has, but his focus when the Lord said, I cannot do this thing without telling. Abraham started interceding. He did not start telling God. We have a tendency of already telling God.
We quarreled yesterday.
Destroy that one.
Yeah, exactly. We quarreled yesterday.
Yes.
These shepherds were fighting mine.
Yes. So, do we intercede on behalf of even our relatives before we even move to churches? Our leadership on at the local church. Do I intercede on your behalf, or I'm quick to go? Yes, I'm quick to say, Pastor Gati, I'm the one who
spread the
news. Do we intercede on behalf of our brothers?
I didn't know Church Heritage could.
Where we are.
It's quite interesting. So I think we've already gone into the human element of these people. But I want us to touch on the drunkenness of the church, of these two churches, Lot and Abraham, and let's then contextualize it to our day-to-day.
Okay.
Yes.
Maybe as I'm going there, I had a comment, an issue comment.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I was thinking to myself, had God not consulted Abraham, what would have happened to this church in Sodom? Yeah. So many times we are quick to look at the log in other people's eyes, and we forget to put up something for those people that we see the log in their eyes. Let's also pray for them. But I'm looking at this church. This is a church that was saved, the Lord's church. The priest. What's interesting about this church, Pastor Gate? This is between you and me.
Right.
Of course, Paida, we have a problem with it. This is a church where the priest is saved, and the subordinate
Come on now.
to the priest
Already we have a problem.
is not saved.
So even with all the prayers,
With all the prayers,
you can still decide.
not to be saved.
You know what, Pastor?
Yeah.
Let me hold you there. There comes the issue of works, right? You know, if ever there's a person who was supposed to go to heaven by works, it's Lot's wife.
Yeah.
Yeesh.
Yeah, she cooked for angels.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was supposed to go there by her works.
Yeah.
You know, look at, I cooked for angels. You know, there are only two people we read in the Bible. Yeah,
cooked for
Sarah.
angels.
Yeah, and this lady. But regardless of cooking for angels,
Yeah.
she still is lost. So don't think when you cook for angels, you make it to heaven. You still need to obey, thou shalt not.
Okay.
Do you see there's a thou shalt not even in this church? Please, as you go, don't turn. Just go. And when you read closely, it is the angel that snatched them out of their sofas.
Yeah.
Let's go. So she was touched of angels. She know how it feels to be touched of angels.
That commandment was probably 2 days old.
You see now? But even if angels touched her,
Still.
she was not saved.
Yeah.
I personally still blame the high priest
Sure.
in the home. Because remember, we talked about accumulation of the stuff that they had, isn't it? So this wife was still thinking of the stuff that they'd accumulated.
The
And
house.
also moving on to the issue of the daughters. They were raised in this home. And to them, because they'd lost hope, all the men have been destroyed. To them, that was all of the men. They did not think that at Abraham's side, there's still some men there. So they decided to give alcohol to their husband, to their father, in order for them to procreate.
Okay.
Putting a plan, a contingent plan, which is many-made,
Just in
because we
case.
think God has failed.
So before you wrap up for us, we are coming to the end of this segment.
Thank you.
We still have a lot to tackle.
Yes.
So Pastor, you're going to wrap up, then we get last words from everyone.
All right.
Ah, that's great.
Allow me to say, even the church and families had its own weaknesses and strengths. But irregardless of the weaknesses, they would still come back to God and recommit themselves. Amen. Even after the drunkenness of Lot, fine, God did not remove the end results of sin. He let them experience the consequences of their sin. And even after experiencing the consequences of their sin, God still loved them. They still waited for the seed. Yes.
Thank you.
Amen. Any last words?
I just want to say that let's all remember that the church started in Eden. All the principles come from Eden.
From Eden.
Thank you. Let's not pitch our tents.
This
Close to
powerful one. Powerful one. This has been an interesting segment of the church heritage. We tackled the church in Eden, the church outside Eden, and the family church. We will be back in the next segment, on the next episode, where we're now going into the Exodus and still in the Old Testament church. So please, until next time, it's goodbye for now.
God bless.
If it's conservative,
If you're looking for something liberal,
And realistic, this is the place to be.